Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Biters, a podcast about The Walking Dead and all things zombie. I'm one of your hosts, Jeff Marsick, a screenwriter and the writer of the independently produced comic book Z-Girl and the Four Tigers. And with me is my artist and good friend, Kirk Manley.
How you doing?
All right. So, as we said, we're here to discuss zombies and The Walking Dead. This week we had episode 3 now, entitled Isolation. Before we get to talking about the show, though, I wanted to... Kirk knows I'm a big fan of numbers and seeing what the ratings are with the show.
Yeah, how's it doing?
So these are the numbers for episode 2, and still holding strong. This is an article that was in Hollywood Reporter. They said that Walking Dead lost 13% of its record-shattering premiere during Sunday's episode. So the premiere had 16.1 million viewers, and even when it loses 13%, it's still 13.9 million viewers.
Wow, which is higher than their largest prior to this season opener.
Yeah.
I think their largest was 12.5 or something.
Yep.
That's awesome.
The only thing that's better than The Walking Dead is Sunday Night Football.
Yeah.
Wasn't there an event that was going on? Was it the playoffs or was it the World Series? Something was going on that weekend. That's on that Sunday. That was drawing away from it. Was it football? Yeah, there was a big football game that weekend. Can't remember who played. But
do you have the numbers for this week?
Well, this weekend we had Sunday Night Football, we had Walking Dead, and we had Game 4 of the World Series.
Yeah.
But the Red Sox won, by the way. Just to throw that out there.
Ouch. Go Yankees.
Yeah.
That's what I got to say to that. Go Yankees.
Go Yankees on the golf course.
From their living rooms while they watch. Well, how about not to veer off into sports because, I'm not a sports guy, but holy cow, 49-9 on the Jets?
Oh, my gosh.
When was the last time a professional football team got beat by 40 points? Oh, my God, that was Bengals, I guess, are strong, huh? Either that or the Jets are horrendously weak.
Yeah, I've got we both have a friend, Joe Mulvey, who's a great artist over at
is Joe a Jets fan?
And Joe is a huge Jets fan. And, I just know that he probably had 9-1 dialed, for the emergency phone call last night.
So what, did they get any numbers for last night?
No, not yet. Those will probably come out later today. It'll still be strong, I'm sure. Kirk and I like to go through the internet and try to find some interesting news items as well and post them to the Biters podcast site on Facebook. I found an interesting article I'll send a link to. It's actually a recipe for how to make your own real life zombie. Yeah.
All right, I'm curious. I'll bite.
There's an ethnobotanist at Harvard who, in the 1980s, he went to Haiti to investigate zombies and this mysterious zombie powder. He found that there are 5 typical ingredients to this powder. There's ground up human remains, usually bone, a small tree frog, a segmented worm, a large New World toad. I don't know how that differs from the Old World toad. And one or more species of pufferfish, because the most potent ingredient in this whole mixture is the toxin that comes from the pufferfish. Huh. And so basically, in what they call sublethal doses, the toxin can leave a victim in a state of suspended animation. Breathing is subdued, barely perceptible by observers, and the heart rate goes near zero, but the person is conscious and aware. So they think that that's what that's the basis of what these voodoo doctors, these bokors, what they call, that's the whole zombie effect. But what I found interesting was that there's a British medical journal, The Lancet. They did in 1997. I mean, this isn't stuff that from the 60s or the 40s or something eons ago. From 1997, they published 3 accounts of zombification. One case, a woman was presumed dead, was buried in a family tomb. She reappeared 3 years later.
I don't know. I'm calling foul.
Apparently, she wasn't like fully dead. She was only kind of partially dead. And anyway, I thought this
what did she eat for 3 years underground or in the tomb? I don't know.
I don't know.
That's wild.
Yeah,
there was a great article. You and I shared it when we first started talking about doing Z Girl and the Four Tigers. And it was a guy a journalist had gone down to investigate in Jamaica. I think it was Jamaica or Haiti. No, it was Haiti. And investigate into this whole zombie phenomena down there, since that's where it kind of originated from. And it was an interesting article because it's what he put together is that there's always been this dark kind of underbelly of indentured servitude and slave trade almost.
Yep.
And that they would kidnap these people or treat them with this kind of stuff that you're talking about, that local potions and stuff that would make them appear dead. And then they would have a funeral and everything for them. And then they would bring them, secure them after the funeral or whatever, and ship them off to either these warlords or these chieftains or these people who were paid to have this slave person, and then they would end up being drugged all the time and have to work for them and it was almost like a mythology or folklore that grew out of this dark slave trade that was going on down there. It was an interesting article. I'll try to dig it up so I can post it for readers on the Facebook page.
Yeah, there was in Haitian lore, they would apparently people would bury, when they were bury loved ones, they'd bury them upside down, face down, so that they couldn't hear, the bodies couldn't hear the summonings of sorcerers or witch doctors trying to bring them back alive. Southgate Media, the parent, I guess, of Biters, is also does Disturbed podcast, which I am a co-host on, and we talk about American Horror Story. And this year, American Horror Story is called Coven, and it follows witches down in New Orleans. And
it's getting a lot of good press.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Is it good?
Yeah, and if you should listen to our podcast when we talk about it.
I should watch the show.
Yeah, you should do that too. But New Orleans is clearly a hotbed of witchcraft and voodoo and all that mysterious, ethereal stuff. Well, one of the characters on there is Angela Bassett, and she plays Marie Laveau, who is like a voodoo priestess almost. But in real history, Marie Laveau, who's the queen of New Orleans voodoo, they said that she never grew old because she herself was of a zombie birth. Oh. And according to voodoo lore, zombie children, if taken straight from the womb, they never age, which is interesting.
Well, how did she get to... I mean, she's not a child on the show, right?
No.
Well, maybe they grow to adulthood and then stop.
Hey, it's artistic license.
That's right. It's a TV show. Come on, we're talking about zombies here.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't confuse me with reality.
Well, it's interesting because there was something that happened in this episode that made me think of reality. And I think it's one of the only times when I know you watch The Walking Dead, and sometimes you draw parallels between real life. Well, you have a difficulty telling real life from fantasy anyway, but there was something, this was like the first time that I saw something or I heard something, and I thought it was apropos to real life as well.
Right.
I'll just go ahead and say it. It was the moment when Herschel had already gone into the woods and he'd gotten the elderberries, and he's about to go into the sick ward, and Maggie shows up and she says, "Oh, you can't go in there," and then Rick shows up and he says, "Oh, you can't go in there," and then the speech that Herschel gave, I actually liked.
Yeah.
And
Me too.
it affected me a little in my eyes for Herschel, because he's one of the characters that, he's the resident Yoda, Ben Kenobi type, and
Right.
he doesn't really do much for me. But this one scene, actually this whole episode, I really liked him. And
Yeah, I agree.
His speech was basically like, look, we come out here in the open, we take a risk. We stay in the prison, we take a risk. Wherever we go, there are risks. And he's like, but what matters is that you choose. You make the choices you make are what you're risking for.
Right.
And he had this calling to do what he could instead of just sitting around in quarantine, but do what he could for the people who are infected with this virus.
Right.
And I like that scene. I thought it was, and again, it's apropos to, I think, real life. We're surrounded by risks everywhere, and it's just a matter of choosing what you're risking for.
Right. No, I agree with you. I think that, the point being that they're constantly faced with a situation where they can't control it. Yeah. And so his point is, the only thing I can't control is choosing, how I'm going to use my life and my time in this situation. And I choose to do it to try and help people. I thought that I agree with you. I think he's, for our character of the week, he and Tyrese were tied, but he's a little bit ahead for me this week. I thought he was a standout character from this episode as well. He always calls it like it is, and I love that about him. And he's just got balls of steel, I mean, and he's got a strong moral code that he continues to try and live by in the face of all of this, taking in Rick
Right.
and his crew at the farm, you know what I mean? It's just since the beginning he's had that. And I thought the other thing that was really powerful about that speech and about his portrayal in this particular episode was its juxtaposition, and not to jump ahead, but its juxtaposition with Carol. Mm-hmm. and the huge thing we find out about Carol, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I'm sure. But it was like her willingness to sacrifice other people to save the group, mm-hmm. versus his willingness to sacrifice himself, mm-hmm. to save the group. I just thought those were interesting juxtapositions, and choices as to how they were going to approach things in this new paradigm.
Right. Well, if you're new to the Biters podcast, what we like to do here is we break down the episode, and we kind of break it in three categories. We go with good, bad, and ugly, and we choose what we like, what we thought was good, what was bad, what was ugly about it. And like I said, the episode we're talking about is episode 3, called Isolation, directed by Daniel Sackheim, who he has a bunch of producer credits, a bunch of writing credits, and I believe the last time he wrote for Walking Dead was in season 3, episode 7, called When the Dead Come Knocking. And that's the episode where our group goes over to the
Foodberry.
Yeah, to go find their own, and I think that was the really tough episode where Daryl's brother, or Merle, tries to beat information
Right.
out of Glenn.
Right.
So that was a really good episode. But this episode, did you see who wrote it?
No.
Kirkman.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah.
Which I thought made some sense, because there were a couple lines in there that were. I don't know if you can hear a siren outside.
Sounds like the Germans are bombing.
Yeah.
The zombies are coming. That's right.
That's it. This podcast's over. But there were a couple lines in this that seemed characteristically Kirkman.
Like.
There was. Yeah.
How dare I ask for you just to give me an example? I should know better.
I think it was the interaction between a couple of the characters, between Daryl and Michonne, where Herschel first looks at her, and when they said they're going to go out to make the run for the antibiotics, and he's like, well, he's been exposed, and she's like, well, he's already given me ticks. He's already giving me fleas. Yeah, later on, Herschel and Carl out in the woods, just this is, so peaceful out here. And Carl's just, well, it was, just some of the interaction between the characters, it reminded me of the interaction in the comic book. Yeah.
There was another one with Glenn and Herschel, I thought, where Glenn turns to Herschel and he's like, unbelievable to have, to have survived all that we've survived, and to think that this is, that I'm going to get killed by some stupid superbug. You know what I mean?
By a cold.
It's like, after all of this, I got to get the cold. Yeah, by a super cold. That's right. That struck me as being something that I would have heard in the book, so I'm not surprised Kirkman wrote it. But that's interesting, because I felt that, now, the first book, listen to me, the first issue, the first episode of this season.
You can tell Kirk reads comic books, right?
Yeah, I'm a little comic book centric. That was by Gimple, right?
Yes.
And then who wrote the second episode? Do you know?
Oh, it was...
so it was a woman.
I
forgot her. She was... Yeah. And then this is Kirkman, because even though they had three different writers, to me, it felt totally seamless.
Absolutely.
In seasons past, you would get an episode like the one with what the heck was it called? Not Calling. It was the one with Rick and Michonne and Carl, and they come upon Rick's old friend from the beginning of the series.
Oh, yep.
What was the name of that episode? I don't know. But anyway, I think that was written by Scott Gimple. But, that was such a standout episode to the rest of the season, and felt completely different in the way that it was written. And it's great that this season, that not only is the writing seems so much better, and so much more effective, but that it's consistent, even though you've got different writers on different books, on different episodes. My apologies again.
Yeah, you'll get over it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. What was your good about it? What did you like about it?
Well, I had 6 things that I pointed to, that I pulled out as things that I thought were really good about this episode.
Okay, we're going to try to keep the podcast to like an hour, so.
Well, that's whittled down from about 25, so no, I'm just kidding. I'll go quick, or we can go one at a time, and you can go through yours, whatever. But, I'm starting to, for the first time, I've been watching this series now almost 4 years, and for the first time I'm really starting to feel attached to these characters. And in a matter of 3 episodes, they have made each one of them so much more believable and endearing, and characters that I'm starting to get nervous about losing.
Yeah.
And up until this point, I just really, with the exception of maybe Daryl last season, and maybe Michonne a little bit, although it was more just because she was so kick-ass. Now, I don't want to lose her because I think she's really cool. Not only is she kick-ass, but she's a really great character. But they're all just so much more realized and real and sincere and heartfelt.
They're gelling more as a group, too. It seemed like the first couple seasons... seasons 1 and 2, everybody was an individual shoved together. I felt they were individual all together. Last year they started coming together. This season, from the jump, they're a core. They're a unit. They all have interactions, and it's funny you mentioned Daryl, because I thought for the longest time Daryl was a white trash redneck stereotype, which is probably what they were shooting for.
Well, yeah, I think they were. I think that was done purposely, and we've seen amazing growth. I mean, he's now basically the leader of the group. He's during the fight scene with Therese and Rick, he's like the most level-headed, and he's really mature.
But it took. There was never really much change in him. Like, even the time he spent with the group, it seemed like he was always that stereotype. Now that he's, more the relationship he's got with the group now. I like him more as a character. I always liked him, but I like him more as a character because I'm seeing that change in him. He's adapting to his group, to his new family.
I think for me, the change in Daryl took place late in last season when there was the episode where he and his brother they escaped together, and he decides to leave the group and go with Merle.
Right.
And they spent an episode showing what it's like on the road with Merle and how different it became apparent to Daryl that he was from his brother. He was no longer like that.
Yeah.
And he didn't look at the world that way, and he didn't look at people that way, and it just wasn't going to work anymore. And that's when it changed for me. But no, I just totally agree. I think they're just so much more important to me now as I watch the show. Next would be I love the twist with Carol being the killer. I mean, just completely left field. Didn't see it coming. All the possible suspects for me, I don't know, maybe you saw it coming, but she wasn't on the list.
Well, you were in my head from last week. So last week, for anybody who didn't listen to podcast last week, I tied whoever fed the zombies, the rats through the fence. I equated that to the person at the back end who killed Karen and David, dragged them out of their cells and torched them. So, because I like to think outside the box, I went with Sasha, which was just clearly ludicrous. But
no, I disagree. I think that after you made that, I thought about it more, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense, especially given the way that she's so protective of Tyrese. But I think that was a red herring in some ways, but not in others, because essentially they went with somebody who was just as protective as Sasha, but not of an individual, but of the group.
Right.
And that's what's happened with Carol this season.
But you were in my head this week.
Well, that's scary.
Yeah, A, that I'm admitting that, and B, that you were actually there, because it's a scary place. But when they go to get in the car, Daryl and Michonne, and then Bob shows up. So last week your call was that Bob was the murderer.
Right.
And when he sees that it's Zach's car, and he gets kind of squirrely, and because he was carrying the 2 gas cans, I thought that was kind of like, I was like, oh my gosh, Kirk's right. It is Bob.
But you see, that is amazingly good writing.
Yeah.
That's just incredible. You know what I mean? I mean, it's really, they're really thinking everything through. I mean, no, they didn't have to have him walk up with gas cans.
Right.
You know what I mean? But they knew if they did that, there'd be people out there who'd be like, you see?
Now, I didn't get when Rick goes into when he goes into detective mode and looks out at the bodies and he looks at it didn't register with me when he looks at the door and he sees the handprint on the door. It didn't register with me that he was comparing hand size, which led him to Carol because she's a woman, so smaller hand size. I was looking for somebody.
I think it was just that it led him to a woman.
I was looking for a hand wound. So the entire time when, later on when our group is going out to retrieve antibiotics, I'm looking at Bob again, because Kirk's in my head going, all right, is his hand wounded? Did he cut himself? What? And so...
No, I think that I didn't understand exactly at first what that was, but then it became clear to me probably it was that it was a woman's hand because of the size, probably because of the placement, the fact that they needed to use the door to push off of, obviously, to help drag the body. They weren't able to do it just by themselves, so it meant they were a small frame, probably a woman. And then I think it doesn't really click in his mind until he comes out and sees her risking her life to clear out the water pump after they had just talked about the fact that, it should wait, and she didn't want it to wait. And all of a sudden I think he's like, here's somebody that would do something stupid enough, that thinking it was the best thing to help everybody when she could get herself killed, or in this case, kill these innocent people, and that's when I think he put two to two together.
And Carol's another one who's grown on me a lot,
Yeah, me too.
especially this season. I understand the trauma that she went through in the initial season, but she just didn't. This is a world where you've got to develop a spine, you got to develop a backbone pretty quick, and she seemed to be the weak link in all this for a couple seasons. This season, she's clearly not that. She's clearly a useful, vertebra in the spine of this group. And when Rick confronts her at the end and says, did you kill them? And she looks over. I like the fact that she just said, "Yep, I did."
Yep.
Yep.
And what an amazing drama that's going to set up. I mean, think of the people that are. I mean, what's Rick going to do about that? How's he going to? This is one of his core group, one of his core people. Plus, she did it obviously because she thought she was helping to save the group. So her motivation has to be taken into consideration too. But what's it also going to do between Rick and Tyrese? They're just starting to form some trust, and it's already jeopardized. And Tyrese has already confronted him with the fact that you got to man up. If you're the cop, then you have to be the one responsible for justice in this place.
Right.
And you got to step up. And then what about Carol and Daryl? I mean, Daryl's like, he even says to Tyrese later in that episode, like, don't you worry, we're going to find who it is. We're going to put a bolt in their head. You know what I mean? And what's he going to do when he finds out it's Carol? It's like just an amazing twist.
I think here's my prediction. I'm putting on my sorcerer's hat. I'm predicting that it's going to be Carol, the one who comes forward to Tyrese, and she'll do it on her own. It's not Rick who's going to come to her and say, you've got to do this. I think Carol's going to, I think she does it on her own. One of the things that we saw in this episode was when Tyrese comes up to her and there's that kind of gentle moment between them. And, when Rick came up to him and apologized for what happened, there was still a solid Tyrese, the defenses were up. But when Carol said, when she basically said, she was sorry to, what happened, and Tyrese softened. And he knows what she means to what everybody in the place means to her, and what she'll do for everybody. So my prediction is that she'll tell him. And, I think Tyrese is going to be okay with it. He's going to see what she did, why she did it. I think he'll be okay with it.
I don't know.
I was wrong on Sasha, so I could be
I don't know if it's going to go that smooth, I mean, I know in the book, spoiler alert for people who don't want to be spoiled, there is a sequence in the prison where there's the serial killer. I think it's a serial killer. They catch him.
Yeah.
And Rick says, there's got to be justice, and they hang him. And I wonder if they're kind of going to use this as, kind of a variation of that, because there's going to be people who, like Tyrese, I think, who are going to want justice. And I think it's going to be a big division between the group about how to do this or what to do with it. And something will come out of it, like Carol will just leave, I think, go out on her own, or somebody will take her out, or I don't know, something. I don't think it's going to go smooth. I don't think anything ever goes smooth in this world. Than The Walking Dead. There's going to be a lot of suffering as a result of her actions.
Right, and I don't think it's going to be, hey Tyrese, I killed Karen. Oh, word, no problem. We'll just I think there's going to be some conflict, but
what about her and Daryl? I mean, Daryl definitely, obviously feels that this is was a horrible murder thing to do, It's going to put a divide between them.
Yeah. Am I making this up, or did you catch a little maybe kind of flirtiness between Michonne and Daryl when they're out by the Charger?
Oh, they're definitely going that way.
Okay,
definitely.
Good. I'm not alone in that.
No, I think that would be a great hookup. I think that would be. I think that would be ideal, but and makes a lot of sense. From a point of view of the characters, I think. But yeah, that could become a problem too with Carol. But I think Carol has always shown that an affection for Daryl that's would obviously she would prefer it be romantic, but Daryl has clearly made it clear that that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? But that he still has an affinity for her. I think he kind of looks at her like the mom that he lost.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see that her and him and Michelle get together. I think you're right on that one. I love another one of the goods I thought was I love the way they're portraying the epidemic. I was really nervous about it when I found out that was what the big internal threat was going to be. But man, I'll tell you, they've made it so believable, so painful to watch. I'm glad both Glenn and Sasha got it. I mean, it would have been discouraging if none of the regulars or main core group, ever came down with it. Wouldn't have been believable. I think if you have studied anything about the flus and the different epidemics and pandemics and stuff like that, it's not always the same groups of people that it hits. And, like I think the H1N1 was primarily hitting young, people in their 20s and 30s, and usually the healthy people that don't get that kind of stuff, it wasn't hitting the old and the young as much. So I'm not going to be surprised if Herschel doesn't come down with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised at that, but I would have been disappointed if nobody in the main group had come down with it. I think that would have been weak. So, but I think my guess is I'm going to go out on my prediction here. Both Glenn and now I think Sasha as well are going to make it through this. I don't think Sasha's long for this world. I think that's going to be another tipping point for Tyrese.
Well, I mean, if he loses Karen and he loses Sasha, Tyrese is how are you going to control him?
Right.
I think the one that will lose. I think Herschel will go. I don't think Herschel makes it.
Yeah. You don't think Herschel's going to make it to, spoiler alert, they're going to make it to the cannibals? Should he lose the other leg?
Yeah, no, I don't.
In the book?
Yeah, I don't think so.
That was just, oh my God, that was a terrifying sequence in the book. That's just unbelievable.
What issue was that around?
That was just before the, where they find the Washington D.C. town. They're kind of, it's shortly after the prison, and they're all kind of scattered, and then they kind of find each other again and become a group. And I think that's when Abraham joins the group. And then they come across there's a church, right? And they come they get involved, and they kind of hang out there, and that becomes their base for a little while. And that's when the group that's the cannibals starts picking them off. Yeah. The only other, Tyrese, we've kind of talked about that. I thought it was great to see him finally boil over. I thought the fight scene with Rick was believable. I think that's the tip of the hat to the book, as we mentioned. Loved the sequence, when he finally pulls out the hammer and gets all busy with it on the zombies. And then, of course, we already talked about Rick going old school on the policeman crime scene. I thought that was great. And again, no, they don't need tons of dialogue, and just do so much without it, and that was a great sequence. You just see him, specking it out and checking it out and figuring it out. And, I thought that was great too, because, he rarely ever exhibits any of his original police training. And I thought that was cool.
Right.
Okay. Did you have any other goods that we didn't touch on?
Well, you mentioned Tyrese, and I'm sitting here watching the episode, and so for fans of the comic book, and as we talked about last week, Tyrese's big "Welcome to the Walking Dead" moment was a scene in the comic book was when he's in the gym at the prison, and they just get overrun. They go to clean out the gym as they're cleaning out the prison of zombies, and they just get overrun. And whoever he's in there with, I can't remember, they escape, but he's just mobbed with people, with zombies. And they close the door and they basically write him off. Oh, Tyrese is done. And then what? Issue or 2 issues later?
Oh, it's a couple issues, yeah.
Tyrese comes out, and he had single-handedly wiped out the entire, just mopped the gym floor. So when he gets out of the car, and how horrifying was it for the car to come up, and when you look through, when the camera goes up a little bit, and you see that herd way in front of them. So the herd descends on the car. Everybody escapes. Tyrese is still in the car. As Kirk and I had talked before we started the podcast, it was almost like, every time he tries to get away from violence just pulls him back in. And, if you were Tyrese at that point, you'd be sitting in the car too, almost like, you know what? It's just not worth it. I quit. I'm done.
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore.
Exactly.
And then he gets, inspired into action, jumps out of the car, and they just descend on him. And same thing, it was, as we had said last week, that they're trying to take elements of the comic book and twist them around a little bit to kind of fit them into what's going on in the show. And there it is. There's our Tyrese in the gym moment.
Yeah.
Michonne, Bob, and Daryl hoof it through the woods, get away from everybody, and they saw Tyrese get mobbed, so they leave him there. And a couple minutes later, or I think when we came back from the commercial break, Tyrese, he survived. So I love that. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I thought they were going to drag it out a little bit more. I thought that it might even go into next episode before before we find him. But I think it was wise to do it the way they did it, because that hurt was so big. But I don't want to jump ahead to that's my ugly, by the way, of the week. But there was no way he was going to be able to take them all out. I mean, the gym in the comic was somewhat believable because there was a limited amount.
Right.
It wasn't an endless flow.
Right.
But and I think that also echoing the book, they've worked his character this season so far similar vein. In the comic, he has his daughter and his daughter's boyfriend with him.
Right.
And that's what he's traveling with. And he hasn't really lost anybody in the comic. And he's a pretty even-tempered guy and rational, and hits it off with Rick really early on, and they really work together as a team. And I really think Daryl kind of fills that Therese comic book role. But anyway, so that was consistent, I thought. And then the daughter ends up, again, spoiler alert, the daughter ends up getting killed, well, actually committing suicide along with the boyfriend, right?
Right.
And that basically just completely pops his cork, and then there is a confrontation with Rick. I don't remember exactly what that was over. It had something to do with that, the death of his daughter, though, if I remember right. I'm not positive, but they end up having a big battle, and he's just basically now just this rage machine that has nowhere to vent it. And then they go into that prison or into the gym,
right? And
that's when he ends up. I think they were just trying to kind of echo that, in that he lost Karen, and it's really pushed him over the edge. And then now he's sitting here. The situation is the sister's in the quarantine with the disease, and just he's losing things left and right, and he just snaps. So really well done, I thought.
I gotta say, my overall good for this show is, for this episode, was the writing, because there were so many things that you just watch and you're just like, wow, that was handled so well. Carl and Herschel out in the woods, when Herschel's out picking elderberries so he can come back and make tea for everybody.
Great sequence.
Yeah, and he just has a normal conversation with Carl, who I've not been the biggest fan of for several seasons. He's so much better this year. And, he asks Carl, hey, when did you get your gun back? And then he compliments him and says, you know what, you've been acting a little bit more mature, in recent days, and it suits you. And one thing that I especially liked was while they're out there, they saw, this zombie comes shuffling up to him, which I thought was cool. It walked into a bear trap, and it's got this big old bear trap hanging on her lower leg, and she comes shambling up. And Carl lifts his gun, goes to draw a bead, and Herschel says, "No, you don't need to do that." Old Carl would have been, I've got a gun and I need to shoot it and show that I'm a man. But new Carl just lowers his gun and they walk away, which I thought was really cool.
I agree. I think that Herschel was trying to teach him that having a gun doesn't always mean using the gun. And that, that was a lesson that he had not been taught yet.
Right.
And that, when he shot the other kid last season, which I still think was the right thing to do, but a lot of people felt, it was the beginning of or the climax of a downward spiral for him, and that he was out of control. Then they just kind of took it away, and now he's kind of gone. And I think Herschel was just trying to really kind of help teach him, there's a time and a place. And I think that the way that scene, again, you started this segment talking about, the writing, and I agree. And I think that the way that scene was written and also acted, of course, and directed, but those two zombies were the most pathetic, sad zombies. I mean, it was the first time in the show that I can remember, with the exception of perhaps the premiere with the bicycle girl, the bicycle zombie, but where you had empathy for them. You sit there going, wow, these are like these pathetic, sad animals that used to be humans, and they're not even a threat in this situation when they're in single numbers like this, and you feel bad for them.
Well, and it's funny that you bring that up, because there were two scenes in there that I thought it was a real sea change in the how everybody deals with zombies. Herschel and Carl out in the woods. There's the one zombie, the tree zombie, who it looked like a branch maybe had fallen on its legs and had been trapped there.
Grown through it almost.
Yeah, it was just decaying there, and like you said, just sad. And then Bear Trap Woman, who was shuffling up. There wasn't in the first couple seasons, there would have been that, that panic. We've got to get out of here. We got to kill these things. And they just kind of looked at them like, they're slow, dumb animals, and we can walk away from them. Later on, when Carol was out trying to fix the water pump that cleared of debris, they had what they called the bird, I think, just a bunch of like bike parts, a little
the bicycle
noisemaker.
Wheels.
Yeah, and she's out there trying to fix this thing. She's not in a rush, just taking her time. Zombies are to her 30 feet away to her right at the fence, not paying her any mind. To 30 feet to her left comes some shufflers out of the woods. She sees them, doesn't pay them any mind, just keeps going about. I thought that was interesting how they're learning while there's still a threat, especially when they get close. They're learning to deal with the walkers in the wild.
Right. No, I agree. And I think too that there were two interesting, again, juxtapositions I thought with that scene with Herschel, and one is between Carl now and Carl back in season 2, when he comes across the biter in the woods, or the zombie in the woods who's stuck in the mud, and he taunts him. And basically, he's curious, but basically he exhibits a childlike lack of respect for the creature. But then he doesn't kill him, or I guess he tried, right? He shot and knocks him down, and he runs away. And so, of course, then that brings up the whole thing where that zombie's the one that eats not Daryl, but the guy with the hat.
It attacks somebody. Yeah.
And so, he had to pay for that emotionally and everything else, and traumatically, psychologically. But I think that, the juxtaposition here was just that, he's learned to respect them.
Yeah.
Very, very much like a large animal, as a hunter, as a person who's going to live in the woods, you got to learn respect for a bear. You don't with it, you know what I mean?
Right.
But you don't have to kill it when you see it if it's not threatening you. You know what I mean?
Right.
The other was Herschel. And again, this was another example, I think, of Herschel and Carol's two different sides of the survival versus humanity argument that I think the show is trying to show or discuss or put out there. And I think that, Herschel still has a bit of humanity in him for zombies. Remember, this is a guy who put zombies in his farm shed because he thought maybe there was a chance that one day there'd be a cure and then you could bring them back. And
his wife was in there.
Then his wife was in there. And so, I think, again, this is a guy who's always trying to kind of keep in touch with humanity in this crazy, insane situation and survive, but not lose sight of that. And Carol, in contrast, is, just becoming much more focused about surviving.
Right.
And everyone else is kind of caught in the middle, I just thought that was really cool, too, about that scene.
I like the they might
because she says to him, I'm sorry, I just thought about something else. When she has the argument with Rick about the water, she's like, there may not be a tomorrow.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then we find out she burned, so she's just really obsessed with survival. Forget moral right and wrong, just whatever it takes to survive.
Right.
So anyway.
So there were a couple times that came up in the episode that we all have jobs to do. I think Beth said it once or twice when she was in that special quarantine with Judith.
Yep.
And I think Herschel reiterates it with Glenn when he's talking with him. And then when you sit back and you look at it, everybody does have a job. Everybody has a certain function that they're performing.
Yep.
And another theme might have been a little heavy-handed, but I let it go because I liked it, was when Herschel was in the office, he's sitting at the chair, and the first thing you see is when the camera comes into the view was that painting, that picture askew, and it says, "Smooth seas do not make good sailors."
Sailors, right? Or
which, that's the overarching theme of character development throughout this series.
Right. No, absolutely. I thought that was great. I thought that was a cool scene too.
Okay, so you liked pretty much 40 minutes of it at least. So what didn't you like?
The bad. I found it. I loved the sentences we've already talked about with Carl and Herschel, but I found it a little bit contrived that Carl would let him go, given the situation, and then also that he would choose to go with him. I just thought that was a little bit forced, so that they could get the two of them off and have that sequence that they had. It just didn't strike me as, because by leaving with Herschel, he's then like not protecting Judith or Beth or any of the other people. That's what he's supposed to be doing. So I found that, he says, I think they tried to justify it by saying that he says to him, well, I'm going to have to tell my father. I'm not going to stop you, but I'm going to tell my father. And he says, well, good luck with that. By the time you find him, I'll be back.
Right.
So, but, it was just fell a little bit, but then when they had that great scene together, I was totally forgiving of it. And then the only other thing for me was, what's going on with the walkers on the fences? It's like all of a sudden that's like not happening anymore. Did the rat person stop doing the rats? Did they start picking up the rats because they figured out that the rats were there, that they've now cleaned them up and they're like checking more often, that they've posted a guard? I mean, there's just they just totally left it. And I know they'll come back to it, obviously, because it's a mystery as to who was doing it. But it just felt like we had a whole episode where, there was this wave of zombies about to smash down and come in on top of them. And now all of a sudden, because Rick threw a few pigs out there, it's gone. And I just found that a little bit, they could have just made a reference to it. They could have said, well, we had to get another group, away this week or something, just to say that that's still in the background.
Right.
You know, but that was
well, and I thought that there was, like you said, I thought the precedent was being set from the first couple episodes that more and more zombies would be congregating at the fence. And now our group goes out and they encounter that massive herd, which, we don't know how far out Daryl and Michonne and those and the other two are they 10 minutes out, 20 minutes out, 30? It doesn't matter. That place was supposed to be 50 miles away, right? So now that group has to hump it all the way back to the prison. Who's going to be following them? So there's a massive ocean of walkers that are inbound to the prison.
Right. Well, I watched a little bit of, actually I watched all of the Talking Dead afterwards, and they had, God, what a train wreck. It's usually fantastic, right? But it just goes to show if you have the wrong mix of people as your guests on that show.
Let me guess. Marilyn Manson.
What a train wreck. The guy was out of control. He was just like rambling. In the beginning, he was incoherent, and then the second half, he was at least making more sense. But he was rude in the sense he kept talking over people, and he had these long-winded, discussions, and it was just,
Gail Ann Hurd must have been like, what?
It was really hard.
Who was
to
on
watch.
the couch with me?
But one interesting theory that he actually, I think, proposed, which I think is really a good possibility, that somehow the governor will become the shepherd of that herd. He will lead that herd to the prison, and then along with hopefully the tank, because that's such an iconic scene from the book. Will invade the because he doesn't have an army anymore of people. But he could have an army of zombies.
That might be a good call, actually.
Yeah, I think that could be pretty cool. Since you brought it up, the herd was my, since we go good, bad, and ugly, my ugly of the week was the herd, because that just was so kick-ass. It was just unbelievably well done. I thought CG-wise, the merging of the CG and the real actors was totally believable for me. It was a scene right out of the comic where the part where the sequence in the comic where Abraham and Rick, I think, first meet. They encounter the first herd in the comic, and it's just this ocean of zombies, and it's a new, once again, they have taken, something that has been scary, the zombies, and they as soon as they start kind of getting manageable, they up it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And this was another case of them upping it. And, man, there's just no dealing with that. That's just, there's only one way to react to that, and that's run.
Yeah. And that was one of 2 points in this episode where I'm watching it and I'm yelling out loud when I see it on TV. The first was Tyrese, in the prison moment, and then when they came over, before that, when they crested the rise and you see everybody, that was the insert expletive here moment. My bad, actually, to back up.
Sorry. Yep.
Well, it's all right, because it's just something I've been harping on for 2 episodes now. My only bad, in all honesty, the first couple of seasons, it was real easy for me to find stuff bad with this show. Now I'm scratching my head most of the time. So my bad is, again, another week. It's Glenn and Maggie, who they don't add anything. You said Glenn has, having Glenn be infected with the virus is good because, like you said, nobody is immune to this, and having one of the regular crew be in there, be in the sick ward. But I just don't have any connection to Glenn right now. Right now, I kind of don't care. And Maggie is basically. I actually like Beth more than I like Maggie now. Beth is she's a tough girl. She's the statement she said that we all have jobs to do, and she's taking her job very seriously, protecting Judith. The cracks are starting to form there, starting to wear on her, which is believable because she's a young girl, and that's a lot of weight for her to carry. Maggie's just seems to be just around to give goo eyes to Glenn and to beg her dad not to do stupid things. So So they're my bad. When it comes to ugly, I got to agree with you. I think that moment of seeing the herd, and if it does, well, we know they basically have to end up at the prison, and that's just going to be a bad situation for everybody. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, no, that was really well done, really excellent.
All right, so this is the fun part of the show where we talk about our kill of the week.
Mine, all of Michonne's head cuts with the katana. They were just all wonderful in a morbid way. Just because they try to do they try to make it it's not like every week she cuts into zombies the same way. It's just the way she does it, through the head, through the sides, Julianne through the middle. It was. It just the heads were slip sliding everywhere, and I just thought
you just gave me an idea for a great book. It's a picture book. It's Michonne. It's almost like a cookbook, right? With pictures, and it's Michonne does zombies, and it's just a different way of
killing a zombie.
Yeah,
it's a good idea.
My kill is who I deemed road rash zombie. When they get stuck with all the zombies around them, and Daryl puts it in reverse, and they hit a whole bunch, and the back end of the car pops up, and he's just flooring it to try to get out of there, and the wheel spinning just shears zombie heads off. That was my kill.
That was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
Like you said last week and the week before, it was okay. Every episode, I go in wondering, okay, what's going to be the interesting dispatch of a zombie this week?
Right. Well, I mean, the first episode, you had the pilot hanging from his entrails. That was pretty unbelievable. And the exploding bags of zombies coming through the ceilings. And then you had, in the next one, you had all the fence crushing, the eye-popping zombie with the head crushed. And now you got the zombie pile that their wheels on. That was just, unbelievable. I mean, it's kind of scary that there's people who sit around and think this stuff up. But, yeah.
I wonder if that's a designated position. There's just one person whose job is just to sit there and think of new and interesting ways to...
Well, I've seen
Nicotero
interviewed, and, he's said, like, so many times they put something together to get ready to shoot it, and he's thinking to himself, there's, like, no way they're going to let me put this on. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no way they're going to let me put this on. Greg Nicotero, sorry. And then he says they do. So it's like, he says he hasn't had any, I think he said that he hasn't had any rejected.
Wow. It's a good track record.
Yeah, there was one, what was it? There was one thing that they talked about at first, and then he thought it was a great idea, and then they said, well, maybe we shouldn't do it that way, and he agreed. But other than that, everything he's done, they've put on. So that's a compliment. Okay,
so your choice for zombie of the week?
It has to be the zombie with the bear trap.
I agree.
Just either one of those two. One with the tree growing through it, but the bear trap one was just the most pathetic thing. I mean, I just felt sorry for her. So I thought that, and to make a creature like that pathetic is pretty amazing.
Character of the week.
Got to be a tie between Herschel and Tyrese for me. I just really think that Herschel's just such a badass for being such an old guy, and I really admire his effort to try and, as a character, try to maintain some sense of morality and humanity to this crazy world. And then Tyrese, of course, just finally getting to see him start to become like the Tyrese in the comic and whip out that hammer and dispatch a couple hundred zombies in 2 seconds with it was pretty amazing. Plus all that he's gone through as a transformation as a character from the middle of last season, to now. It's just it's just been great transformations. Him, Carol, even Rick to some degree, Daryl, just great transformations.
I agree. I echo both of your choices here. Herschel really stepped up for me. Again, it's due mostly to the writing of the character, but what they did for Herschel in this episode, he made him more than just the resident sage, the resident wise man, and it takes some stones to decide that you're going to go into this place where disease is rampant and decide that you're going to help people. And right. That speech that he makes to Rick and Maggie, that it was funny because when he gets done saying, giving that speech, and it wasn't like some FDR or, Obama-esque speech. It was just a statement like, this is the way it is. And when you get done with something like that, you look at Maggie and Rick, and I could just see them kind of look at each other and just, kind of say, well, I got nothing to add to that. It, right. Sounds good to me. Okay.
Right. Well, basically, how could they argue with him? And he knew that. He knew that. He said that, what you're trying to hold me back because of your emotions.
Right.
And I'm telling you, this is what I want to do with my life, and this is my choice, and it is the right thing to do. And if I can help make some of those people last a little longer till they get the medicine, then it's worth it for me. So you can't, don't get in my way. And, right. I think his age helps with his wisdom too. He kind of realizes that, he doesn't have a lot of time left anyway. You know what I mean? So,
he's looking more and more like Santa with every episode too.
Yeah, that's true. But the other thing I thought was funny, with the council when they decide to go get the medicine, and he, and I think it was a precursor to this. He doesn't want to sit around on the sidelines and not help.
Right. And
they say, okay, we're going to go to this. And he's like, well, then I'll come with you because I'll know exactly what to get and I'll know where it'll have it and blah, blah, blah. And Daryl's like, dude, inevitably there comes a time when we have to run. You know what I mean? And you got one leg. And
I thought that was funny.
He's like immediately like, I'll stay here and help.
Yeah. We always run. Okay, I'll draw you a map.
That's right. I'll draw you a map. That's what he says. That's right. It was great.
Yeah.
That was great, sad, but great, which is, I think, again, great writing because then they come back to him and he's like determined. He's like, fuck it. I'm going to do something. I'm not going to just sit here in this other part all safe and happy while all these poor people, they're suffering. You know what I mean? When I know there's something I can do. Anyway, go ahead.
I liked Tyrese too, just because big fan of his of the character in the comic, and it was good to see him come into his own as the character, as the character that I'm used to. So
agreed. Good episode. I 4.25 headshots.
4.25. We didn't do it last week. What did you give last week's?
I think we did do it last week.
No.
I think I was over 4 as well.
Okay.
I think it was like 4.5 or something as well, and I can't tell you exactly why, I couldn't give it more, like why 75% of that last point, other than, just there are a little couple of things, that we, like the walkers on the fences and stuff that I thought that were just kind of like left details wise. But all in all, it's fantastic. It's just been a great beginning of the season.
It has.
In fact, I think this is the first time that there's been 3 episodes in a row, knock on wood, that were, this strong and this good and that I enjoyed this much. It's always been 1 or 2 and then boom, you hit a dud.
Absolutely.
Or a string of duds. So, fingers crossed because, the feeling is that it's not going to let up. The things are just going to keep ramping up, So,
well, I also have an extra category that I like to. I think I started last week, which is my red shirt of the week.
Right.
That character that they've pretty much telegraphed is going to be isn't going to be around long. And while we didn't see any deaths this week, my red shirt of the week was Dr. Subramian or Dr. S.
Yeah.
When Sasha comes walking in and she's got the sniffles and she's showing symptoms, she's like, I got to see Dr. S. Yeah, I just knew right there. No, he's got the sickness.
Yeah, that was pretty crude when he like sneezed all the blood all over Herschel's face.
Yeah.
Right? And Herschel just takes the mask off, folds it up, wipes his forehead, just kind of like, well, there you go.
Well, I'm in it now.
I'm in it now, baby. I'm deep in it now. That was good. You know, one other thing I want to mention that we haven't talked about, that I forgot to make a note of, but I'm just going to wing it here. Something else, you know, the show has clearly trying to address the issues that people have been having with it. You know, the writing and the not telegraphing so obviously, and the predictability of the past, and the run-on dialogue that was, you know, the telling instead of showing, and all that stuff seems to be being addressed. The fact
they're listening to our podcast.
There you go. Of course they are.
Yeah.
But the other issue that was becoming really prominent last season was the lack of ethnic diversity to the group, and the fact that the minorities or African American characters were like coming on board for 1 or 2 episodes and then getting wiped out. And there was this kind of running internet dialogue about the fact that you couldn't have any more than one strong male African American male lead on the team. And,
right.
At any one time. And they really, you know, I noticed that last night when here you got Daryl out on this run with 3 other characters, all of them African American, and it was like and all of them, you know, clearly gonna be there for a while, you know, maybe not the whole season, but definitely for a while. And so,
and how interesting is it that it's Daryl out with 3 African Americans?
Absolutely, and there's absolutely that's done on purpose. Absolutely. Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, they're trying again to show his development as a character, you know, and his growth as a person, and the way he's changed from his origin in the series. Absolutely. But I mean, you've got Sasha, you've got Michonne, you've got Bob, you've got Tyrese. There's a number of characters that came over from I want to say Mayberry RFD from Woodbury, and then and the Dr. S. He looked like he was either Indian to me or something. You know, and I just think that they're doing a much better job of getting the cast to be more diversified and better representation of the population in. I believe it's in Georgia, right, where that's supposed to be. Yeah. Yep. So I think that's another tip of the hat, or hats off to the show for addressing that and not being overt about it. Instead of, you know, trying to be overt about it, they are just building these great characters, and letting that happen naturally, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Is that all you got,
man? Yeah.
All right. Well, we have come to the end of yet another exciting and intellectually stimulating episode of Biters.
Well, at least another hour.
If you download this off iTunes, please leave us, leave some reviews and ratings on iTunes, because we love to hear what you think of it. And on the Facebook site, leave questions and comments. If you have any questions, we'll address them on the air, and we'll give you a shout out on the podcast. Other than that, please do check out the Disturbed podcast, where I talk about American Horror Story with my friend Scott Malkus, which is also a Southgate Media production. And if you go to the Southgate Media website, you can find they've added a Star Wars podcast. They've got
they just started
like half a dozen podcasts that you can listen to, all entertaining, all good stuff. And with that, we will see you
don't forget to check out
next week. Oh, by the way, happy Halloween to everybody. Have fun trick-or-treating. Don't forget to catch the classic movie, monster movies on TMC on Thursday, I believe. I think they're running a marathon.
And don't forget to check out Z-Girl and the Four Tigers at zgirl.org, where you can see some of Jeff's great writing and my art, and learn about Z-Girl and all of her exploits, and check out her comic book.
Other than that, have a safe Halloween, and we'll catch you back next week.
Take it easy.